Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about 12 Ounce Mouse Season 3. I never thought 12 Ounce Mouse would come back for another season, and it might, from my understanding, come back for a season after this even, or there'll be at least something after this. But Season 3 was a bit of a surprise, and much like every season of 12 Ounce Mouse, it is completely different from the previous seasons. I think in terms of placing this is more about going into other dimensional worlds outside of the simulation, which we had seen in the previous two seasons. This pretty much takes place exactly after the Invictus special. It gets a little confusing, I will say, because the first episode of Season 3, which is also, I believe the one that played on April Fool's Day, was Francis Cheap and Out of Control, which is this reporter going around and interviewing everyone in Cardboard City within the simulation, like it takes place, I'm assuming, before Invictus. Invictus really should be in this season somehow. It's sort of weird because that episode clearly takes place before Invictus, and then Invictus happens, and then you get to episode 2, which is very much after Invictus, when Fitz comes in, sucks everybody out of the simulation into a portal, and shoots them all off into separate dimensions. And some people are together, like Golden Joe and Stone Peanut Cop. Some people are separate. It's sort of just a weird thing because you're never sure what weird dimension anyone's in, and apparently they're stuck in it and trying to figure it out. Well, Fitz is stuck with this new character, Aria, and she's trying to kind of like mess with his memory and his understanding of how he got to this place, and where everyone else is even, and how much of this he created. Sort of. I mean, it's still 12 Ounce Mouse. It's still weird. There's still a whole extended sequence where you just listen to people kind of mess up launching jet skis, which is, this kind of a humor. But it's sort of, if the first season of 12 Ounce Mouse was this idea of like, well, Adult Swim has become far more successful. Let's do a weirder, stranger thing. Okay, that happens, let's make another season and let's make it an action show. Now, Season 3 comes at an interesting time since it's been a very long time, like over a decade, since we've had a season of 12 Ounce Mouse. What this season does is basically like the idea of Twin Peaks Season 3, which this is a very Lynchian type of show, and it's basically that with all these streaming services and networks, a network would probably pay a lot more for a show like this than they previously would have. Bringing these shows back is financially makes more sense because they have financially more on the line and they know they can get these people back. I don't think 12 Ounce Mouse has that kind of fandom, to be honest with you. I love this show. This is my third review on it. Clearly I'm into it. I don't think this is like that. I sort of almost think it's like a comment on one of those because they're like, well, we're just going to continue the existence of this and shoot off all these things into other existences or dimensions, and because we have to continue this story on somehow, and it's sort of this never-ending existential kind of dread of this show is none of these people can escape and find out what the real world is, what exists beyond this simulation. And you could look at the simulation as the show itself. You could also look at the show because you have this guy named Industry Man, who is formerly like the Clock, I guess. I think I'm getting this right. So much of this plot sort of makes sense, sort of doesn't. Even the episode order doesn't make sense. I noticed they changed the episode 1 that is the episode 1 even on their website, and they moved it to the end. So when I wanted to catch episodes on the website, I ended up confused on where I even was, which is very much the show. I appreciate you. I get it, but also like you should, maybe that's the correct order they wanted. I don't know. There's probably some interview with Matt Malero that I'm missing where he explains all this, but I prefer to be confused by 12 Ounce Mouse. But I also think another thing with Industry Man, who's formerly the wall clock we saw slowly moving in other episodes of 12 Ounce Mouse, is the idea that they made all these dimensions and simulations, and that he's like, Industry Man like works for Scheid, I guess it's the Scheid or the Shit or something corporation, and he wants to use the box of worlds so he can have control over it. But I think part of that idea is that, well, corporations and this idea of money and greed eventually find a commodity out of existence itself, like a dimension, like a world. Could it go that far? And certainly, the whole idea of like a Superman the movie type scenario kind of shows you like, are there limits to the idea of a corporation? And that brings up a whole other kind of idea, because this is a show that is totally being brought back because a corporation needs more content to fill a streaming service with names that definitely would get a cult following to definitely watch this no matter what. If you're in the 12-Ounce Mouse fandom, which I think there's like 3 of us or something, then you'll definitely watch it on HBO Max, sure. But this is like, we need as many of these worlds as possible. Could you look at this as a comment on IP itself? The idea that like it wants this box of worlds, it wants this strange, weird things just because they know there's something of value in it. It doesn't even matter what it is or the moral implications of really doing that. Which is an interesting idea to think of. Maybe I'm throwing too much into this. Maybe I've read too much into 12-Ounce Mouse. Maybe it's a silly show. This show kind of does all sorts of things, including like a Matrix Reloaded reference with Arya pretty clearly. I like the character of Arya and how her suit changes different colors. She's an interesting character. You're never really sure where her allies lie, and they're not entirely clear fully on that. This kind of gets in the whole idea that Fitz had been creating all these other worlds and help develop that, and really like how he kind of almost like doesn't care, which is kind of the most interesting thing when you think about his role in this, because now, like before, he was just kind of lost in the ether of it, then he was fighting it, and now he's like stuck in all these worlds, and it's like through him getting drunk all the time kind of makes you think like he's the creator, he's the originator, but it feels like the arguments over it don't even involve him, which you could also take as someone who's working on intellectual property within a corporation as well. And I think also, you know, now I'm on that kick, I guess. When I looked at how the first one said something about Adult Swim then, Adult Swim now is far more important. You know, you have Rick and Morty, it's so much more powerful. So of course, like a cheap, crappy show is going to look like this rather than the cheap, crappy show that it looked like in 2006. But I do think this is trying to say something about the idea of different worlds and strangeness. This does feel a little more like his Aqua Teen stuff than his 12-Ounce Mouse stuff, and it's particularly because he's not working on, like, I think Aqua Teen was running and Perfect Hair Forever was running and 12-Ounce Mouse was running within that year, unless I'm wrong and one was taking time off at that time. It feels like far more of his attention sort of is on this. Like, there's definitely a story at play, you're never sure where it's going. I love the opening theme, even though it's such a, like, kind of like bigger, huger kind of like definitely like streaming service thing trying to show off. And this wasn't made for HBO Max, it is on Adult Swim, but it feels like sort of a comment on that. But like that song feels like a big like we're back and we've got money, and I really like it. I don't think I can say that band's name. I also like that Skywalker Sound did the sound for this. I don't know if that's a joke or like it seems like they actually did do it, but it seems sort of funny, like a crappy show like 12-Ounce Mouse that previously like would release the wrong audio mix to episodes and stuff. Now is like, let's go to, you know, the people who made the sound for Star Wars, because I guess we can do that now. I think this is continued on in its strangeness, but unlike the action season and the just sort of weird existential art house season, this is the strange dimensional sci-fi season, I would say. This is the sci-fi season if there ever was one. I kind of like this new bent on 12-Ounce Mouse because it's kind of like that weird tinge of sci-fi that like sci-fi fans like, but like nobody else does. And I think 12-Ounce Mouse is already that for animation, so I'm not sure the Venn diagram of people who even would be into both of these things, but 12-Ounce Mouse season 3 does that. And I like that it still can do strange, weird things and still, like, you know, have these characters like the guy with the sunglasses and the long hair whose name I didn't look up. But I would have liked more Fitz and Skillet together again. I would have, you know, the idea of Shark and Rectangular Businessman kind of being morphed together in this disgusting thing shows you, like, how these worlds and all these experiments with dimensions and simulations can, like, almost warp your identity, which I think is something Fitz is almost having to deal with, but also sort of is too drunk to care. It brings up the idea of creation and the creator and what that creation can be morphed into. It makes me think what Matt Malero thinks of Aqua Teen or pretty much anything he's created. I do think this is maybe Matt Malero's big opus kind of story, and I was so into it. It's like The one thing I like about this is I think a lot of Adult Swim stuff, from Off the Air to Too Many Cooks to all the stuff they do, can be strange and weird, but this is one that I often think has a point and then sort of like doesn't give a shit about the point and does the Lynchian thing, but also is like, well, let's put a joke in here where this one guy's like killing funky little dragon things. Are we making a statement on dragon tails, or is it just funny to chop off dragon heads? I don't know, but you're gonna go with it. And it has that kind of like that nihilistic kind of approach of an Aqua Teen episode where like stakes don't matter, which I know is like something he really wanted to bring to 12 Ounce Mouse, and is there. It feels like that attitude's still there while still doing continuity. It's like he definitely cares about these characters and this continuity, but almost has such a disregard for it as well, which I just sort of love. I don't mean that in a negative, like he doesn't care about the continuity. He clearly does. He almost can throw it away and reinvent it and shake it up in ways that, you know, certainly something like Infinity Train we're seeing do now, but 12 Ounce Mouse does it not as a reaction to the previous season. It almost feels like just where the creator wants to go, which I sort of really like about these seasons. I think this is an interesting one. Definitely wonder if you started here. I think that's a very weird place to be. But it's strange to see the show being so much more high budget than it's ever been before. I think it's because Matt Miller has given Adult Swim so much. Frankly, he deserves to like have his weird, you know, strange, ugly ass design show. But it does feel more like Aqua Teen than it ever has before. But I really love what they're doing with 12 Ounce Mouse. I like the idea of these dimensional worlds and being stuck in them and never being thrown out into different strange worlds. It feels like that kind of weird, strange sci-fi where you're afraid, is someone going to get stuck in a dimension? How do dimensions work? And since that's such a dimension hopping seems even stranger and crazier and scarier than Aliens, because at least you sort of know where space is. I don't know how to get to a dimension, and it seemed like they could be trapped in there, and I think the designs of it make you feel like maybe they're never out of a simulation. Is like that even who Fitz is? Like, are they someone else? Like, what is identity and all this? It just makes you sort of question everything, while also waiting to, you know, see the eye creature, you know, be the king of the castle or something in their weird castle ship. It's wonderful to see the show back. I don't think it's the same as season 1 and 2, but I think it's definitely its own identity at this point. It reminds me of the kind of like a show being brought back and giving it tons of money, and that's certainly an incredibly stupid and strange case in 12 Ounce Mouse season 3's case, because I don't think this was a show that anyone ever expected to come back with more money, but it has, and I still really like what it's doing with it. I still think this is a great, crazy, awesome show, and I think it's definitely one of the most underrated Adult Swim shows that there's ever been, because I think people are so turned off by various different things, they don't really see the real genius and fun and strangeness at play that very few things can do. And I think it's one of the kind of big zenith opus projects of Adult Swim. Watching this just proves that to me more. I'm so down to watch and review more 12 Ounce Mouse as it comes out. I hope they have any more. I'd like to see what's going on with Arya and Fitz, and what's going to happen with that crew, and watching them have guns and shoot each other, which didn't happen a ton but still happened in this. I see so much more potential here, because I can see like they're going to go into stranger, weirder, dimensional simulation worlds, and maybe we'll never find our way out of it, but maybe in life we never find our way out of this anyway and make any sense of it. So maybe 12 Ounce Mouse is the perfect encapsulation of this crazy world, or maybe it's just, you know, a poorly drawn mouse doing some really strange shit. Either way, I still love this show in both regards, and I think 12 Ounce Mouse season 3 kind of lives up to the hype and the strangeness and all of my expectations and love that I've had for season 1 and 2, even though it does it in a different way, but I don't think I'd want it any other way. So if you've seen 12 Ounce Mouse season 3 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.